This is a short lecture on legal documentation. When in court, the lawyers will have access to all medical records. The lawyers will closely inspect the documentation for any discrepancies or questionable practice, and believe me, if it's there, they're going to find it. Most likely, your registered nurse notes are not a part of the legal record. If it's not documented, it is not done. Always remember that. Most facilities chart by exception. As long as the patient meets the normal values that are established, a registered nurse does not need to chart it. An example is the care paths that are established at Aspirus for different things like pneumonia, congestive heart failure, GI bleed, and acute myocardial infarction. Registered nurses will only have their charting to re-jog their memory. Many times it's years after when the incident goes to court, and if you have to try to remember 10 years ago what happened, your charting is going to go a long way for you in helping you remember. There are consequences for poor documentation. Poor patient care. Many registered nurses and physicians base their plan of care off of a registered nurse's note. Many providers will assess the INOs and the DAR notes and things like that. And if documentation is incorrect, the patient can certainly suffer from that. There can be lost revenue and reimbursement. If a patient's DRG is mislabeled, the organization will lose funding for that. Medicare and Medicaid can revoke reimbursement if the patient care is seen as neglectful. If you are unsure of another's documentation, be sure to get it clarified. Some of the common errors in documentation are listed here on the slide for you. Always be sure the orders are correct before you sign them off. So an example is many errors are caught since 24-hour chart checks were implemented. Improper documentation. For an example, on a congestive heart failure patient and their charting, you have to make sure that you circle yes when the patient did not meet that standard. And it should have been circled no, that they did not meet it. Always use quotes if you are quoting a patient. Document conversations with providers even if the orders are not received. And some risk management things are listed for you here. Document all cares given, conversations with providers, nursing interventions, chain of command notifications, and complete all forms and documentation tools that are provided for you. They're there for a reason. Do not use the term complains. It gives a negative annotation. Be objective and document the patient states or the patient reports. Anything that will be given to a patient at discharge needs to be clearly written so that the patient and family is able to understand what they need to do. And do not use any abbreviations on patient information because they are not going to know what those abbreviations are. Also, do not blame others. Documentation should be concise, descriptive, truthful, thorough, and objective. Not subjective, and do not include opinions. Again, use the flat mnemonic: F for factual, L for legible, A for accurate, and T for timely. What does it mean to be concise? Extraneous details tend to confuse more than clarify. Determine what facts are pertinent and write them while remaining clear, accurate, and truthful. If it doesn't need to be in there, don't put it in there. If a patient states something that you want to include in your charting, be sure to place it in quotation marks and accurately write what the patient stated. You cannot add information into a quotation mark. Use detail. Your written document should be descriptive. Be sure to quantify the charting. What I mean by that is the patient walked 90 feet and tolerated it well. Be sure to paint a clear, descriptive, and accurate picture of what occurred so that the next registered nurse is able to fully understand what occurred, or so that if you are ever called to court, you are able to recall that event. Descriptive categories can include color, position, location, drainage, time, setting, people present, what was discussed, like in a family meeting or a conference, and evaluation. Example of poor electronic documentation is copying over assessments from shift to shift and not properly looking them over, because you will make errors if that's the case. Improving documentation. The best thing is to document as soon as you can after that care was done. Never document before the care is done, because something is going to come up or change. Review your institutional policies regularly and make sure you adhere to them. Follow late entry procedures if you have to make them, so that you are doing it correctly. And only use approved abbreviations. Document communication with your supervisor and with the physicians. Do not cosign unless you have verified the accuracy, especially in things like a heparin drip, PCA pumps, returning or wasting narcotics. You have to save your registered nurse license and think about that. And lastly, make sure you include all data, especially when a medication has specific instructions, like metoprolol. You have to enter the heart rate in Epic, or enter the blood sugar before you give the insulin type of thing. So I hope this was helpful.